Jake Mitchell woke up before dawn, just like he had every day for the past 15 years. The old rooster was crowing outside his window, and he could hear the cattle moving around in the distance. He rolled out of bed, pulled on his worn jeans and boots, and walked to the kitchen to make his usual black coffee. The house felt empty, like it always did. Too big for just one person, but it was all he had left of his family. His parents had died in a car accident 5 years ago, leaving him this 1,000-acre ranch in the middle of Montana. Most days, Jake didn't mind being alone. He had his horses, his cattle, and enough work to keep him busy from sunrise to sunset. But sometimes, especially in the quiet moments like this, he wondered what it would be like to have someone to share coffee with in the morning. Jake grabbed his hat from the hook by the door and stepped outside. The spring air was still cold, and he could see his breath in the morning light. 3 days ago, a bad storm had hit the area. High winds, heavy rain, and even some hail had spooked his cattle. When he counted them yesterday, he was missing about 20 head. They had probably wandered off looking for shelter and got lost. Now he had to find them before they got too far away or ran into trouble. He walked to the barn and saddled up Thunder, his favorite horse. Thunder was a big brown horse with a white mark on his face. The horse was getting older, but he was still strong and knew these trails better than Jake did. They had been riding together for almost 10 years, and Thunder could sense when something was wrong before. Jake even noticed it. The first day of searching had been frustrating. Jake rode for 8 hours and only found 5 of the missing cattle. They were hiding in a valley about 3 miles from the ranch, looking scared but healthy. He brought them back home and put them in the main pasture where they would be safe. The second day was even harder. He found 7 more cattle scattered in different directions, some of them almost 6 miles from home. It took him most of the day to round them up and get them back to safety. Now it was the third day, and Jake was getting worried. He still had 8 cattle missing, and he had already checked all the usual places where they liked to hide. Today he would have to go further out, to the old trails that nobody used anymore. These paths led to parts of the ranch that had been abandoned for decades. There were old homesteads out there, places where families used to live before they gave up and moved to the cities. Jake rode Thunder along a narrow trail that wound through thick pine trees. The morning sun was getting stronger, but the trees blocked most of the light, making everything feel dark and mysterious. He had been riding for about 2 hours when he heard something strange. It sounded like cattle, but they were making nervous. Sounds like they were scared or upset about something. He followed the sound until he reached a clearing where he could see an old homestead. The house had fallen down years ago, but the foundation was still there, along with what was left of a barn. Jake could see 3 of his missing cattle standing near some trees, but they were acting strange. Instead of grazing peacefully like cattle usually do, they were moving around restlessly and looking toward the old barn. Jake rode closer to see what was bothering them. Maybe there was a wild animal hiding in the ruins, or maybe they had gotten tangled up in some old fence wire. As he got nearer to the barn, Thunder suddenly stopped walking and made a soft sound. The horse's ears were pointed forward, and he was staring at something Jake couldn't see yet. That's when Jake saw her. There was a person sitting against what was left of the barn wall. At first, Jake thought it might be a teenager who had gotten lost while camping or hiking. But as he rode closer, he could see it was a young woman, probably in her 20s. She was wrapped in a gray blanket that looked like it had been through a lot of rough weather. Her dark hair was messy and looked like it hadn't been washed in days. Jake's first thought was that she might be hurt. Maybe she had been in a car accident and walked here looking for help. But there was no car anywhere around, and this place was at least 10 miles from the nearest road. How had she gotten here? And more importantly, how long had she been sitting here alone? The woman looked up at him as he approached, but she didn't seem scared. Her eyes were a bright green color, and even though she looked tired and hungry, there was something strong about the way she looked at him. She didn't cry or beg for help like most people would if they were in trouble. She just watched him quietly, like she was trying to figure out if he was someone she could trust. Jake slowly got down from Thunder, moving carefully so he wouldn't frighten her. He had always been good with scared animals, and he used the same gentle approach with people. "Ma'am," he said in a quiet voice, "are you hurt? Do you need help?" She shook her head but didn't say anything. Now that he was closer, Jake could see that she was in bad shape. Her clothes were old and worn out with holes in several places. The blanket she was wrapped in was thin and wouldn't keep anyone warm on a cold night. But what worried him most was how thin she looked. Her face was pale, and he could tell she hadn't eaten a good meal in a long time. Jake looked around the area and didn't see any bags, food, or supplies. No tent, no backpack, nothing that would suggest she was camping or traveling. It was like she had just appeared here with nothing but the clothes on her back and that old blanket. The cattle were still acting nervous, probably because they could sense that something was wrong. "When did you last eat something?" Jake asked gently. The woman looked down at her hands and was quiet for a moment. Then she looked back up at him and said, 2 days ago. "Maybe 3, I'm not sure." Her voice was soft and hoarse, like she hadn't used it much lately. Jake felt his heart sink. 3 days without food, sleeping outside in the cold spring weather, with no shelter and no way to get help. How had she survived this long? And what had happened to bring her to this desperate situation? Jake knew he had to do something. He couldn't just leave her here alone. Even if she didn't want help, she needed it. The nearest town was 20 miles away, and it would be getting cold again tonight. She wouldn't survive another night out here without proper food and shelter. "My name is Jake Mitchell," he said, taking off his hat so she could see his face better. "I own a ranch about 5 miles from here. Would you like to come back with me? I can give you some food and a warm place to rest." The woman studied his face for what felt like a long time. Jake could see her thinking, trying to decide if she could trust him. He stayed very still and kept his voice calm and gentle. Finally, she nodded just a little bit. "Okay," she whispered. Jake helped her stand up, and he was shocked by how light she felt. She was definitely not getting enough food. He helped her get on Thunder behind him, and she held on carefully as they started the ride back to his ranch. The 3 cattle followed them, probably happy to finally be heading home too. As they rode through the forest, Jake wondered what her story was and how she had ended up alone in the middle of nowhere with nothing. The ride back to Jake's ranch felt longer than usual. He could feel the woman holding on to him carefully, not too tight, but enough to stay balanced on Thunder's back. She didn't say anything during the ride, and Jake didn't push her to talk. He figured she would share her story when she was ready. Right now, the most important thing was getting her somewhere safe and warm. Thunder seemed to understand that this was different from their usual cattle herding trips. The horse walked, steadily but gently, avoiding the rougher parts of the trail. The 3 missing cattle followed behind them, probably glad to be heading home after 3 days of wandering around lost in the wilderness. As they rode through the pine trees, Jake's mind was racing with questions. How long had she been out there? Where had she come from? Did she have family somewhere who were looking for her? But mostly, he wondered what could have happened to leave someone so young in such a desperate situation. In all his years living on the ranch, he had never found anyone in such bad shape. When they finally reached the ranch house, Jake helped her down from Thunder. She stood quietly while he tied the horse to the fence post, looking around at the property with wide eyes. The ranch house was nothing fancy, just a simple 2-story building with a front porch and a red barn nearby. But compared to sleeping outside with no shelter, it probably looked like a palace to her. "Let me just put Thunder in the barn, and then we'll get you inside," Jake said. He quickly unsaddled the horse and gave him some fresh water and hay. The 3 cattle that had followed them home went straight to the main pasture where they could see the rest of the herd. They seemed happy to be back with their friends. Jake walked back to where the woman was standing. She was still wrapped in that thin blanket, shivering slightly in the cool morning air. "Come on," he said gently. "Let's get you warmed up." He opened the front door and held it for her. She hesitated for a moment, then stepped inside. Jake could see her looking around at everything, the wooden floors, the old furniture that had belonged to his parents, the family photos on the walls. It was a comfortable home, lived in but clean. His mother had always kept it nice, and Jake tried to maintain it the same way. The bathroom is right down that hall if you need it, Jake said, pointing toward the back of the house. There are clean towels in the closet. Why don't you take a few minutes to freshen up while I make us some breakfast? She nodded and walked slowly down the hall. Jake heard the bathroom door close quietly. He went to the kitchen and started pulling things out of the refrigerator. Eggs, bacon, bread for toast, some of the homemade jam his neighbor had given him last month. He wanted to make sure she got a good, filling meal. While the bacon was cooking, Jake thought about what else she might need. Clean clothes, for one thing. Her clothes were worn out and dirty from sleeping outside. He remembered that his mother had left some clothes in the guest room closet. They might be a little old-fashioned, but they would be clean and warm. About 10 minutes later, the woman came back to the kitchen. She had washed her face and hands, and her hair looked a little neater, but she was still wearing the same worn-out clothes. She stood in the doorway like she wasn't sure if she should come in. "Please, sit down," Jake said, pointing to the kitchen table. "Breakfast is almost ready." She sat down carefully, still keeping that old blanket wrapped around her shoulders. Jake could see her watching him as he cooked, like she was trying to figure out why he was being so kind to a complete stranger. He didn't blame her for being cautious. If he had been living on the streets with no one to trust, he would probably be suspicious of everyone too. Jake filled 2 plates with scrambled eggs, bacon, and toast. He set one in front of her along with a glass of orange juice and a cup of coffee. "I hope you like it," he said, sitting down across from her with his own plate. She looked at the food for a moment, and Jake saw tears fill her eyes. She blinked them back quickly and picked up her fork. "Thank you," she whispered. Jake watched as she took her first bite. She ate slowly, like she was savoring every taste. It reminded him of how his cattle acted when they found fresh grass after a long winter, grateful for every bite. It broke his heart to think about how hungry she must have been. "Take your time," Jake said. "There's plenty more if you want seconds." They ate in comfortable silence for a while. Jake finished his breakfast first and refilled both their coffee cups. The woman was still eating, taking small bites and making the meal last. Finally, she set down her fork and looked at him. "My name is Elena," she said quietly. "It's nice to meet you, Elena," Jake replied. "I'm glad you're here." Elena looked down at her hands, which were wrapped around the warm coffee cup. "I don't have any money to pay you for the food," she said. "Or for letting me come here." "I'm not asking for money," Jake said. "I'm just trying to help." Elena was quiet for a moment, then she started talking. Her voice was soft, and Jake had to lean forward a little to hear her clearly. She told him that she had been living with her grandmother in a small town about 100 miles away. They had a little house with a garden where they grew vegetables and flowers. Her grandmother had raised her after her parents died in a car accident when she was 12 years old. "Grandma was all the family I had left," Elena said, her voice getting even quieter. "She taught me how to cook and take care of a house. We didn't have much money, but we were happy." Jake nodded, encouraging her to continue. He could tell this was hard for her to talk about. "3 weeks ago, there was a fire," Elena continued. "It started in the middle of the night. I don't know how it began, maybe some old wiring in the walls. By the time we woke up, the whole house was full of smoke. I tried to help Grandma get out, but she couldn't move fast enough. The smoke was too thick." Elena stopped talking and stared at her coffee cup. Jake could see her hands shaking slightly. He waited patiently, knowing she needed time to find the words. The fire department came, but it was too late. Grandma didn't make it, and our house burned down completely. Everything was gone, our clothes, our photos, everything we owned. I had nowhere to go and no money saved up. Jake felt his chest tighten with sadness for her. Losing her grandmother and her home at the same time must have been devastating. "I'm so sorry," he said quietly. Elena nodded, wiping away a tear. "The town tried to help at first. Some people offered me a place to stay for a few days, but I didn't want to be a burden on anyone. I thought I could find work somewhere and start over, so I started walking, stopping in different towns, looking for jobs." She explained that she had been traveling for weeks, doing small jobs when she could find them, cleaning houses, helping in restaurants, working in gardens. But the jobs never lasted long, and she never made enough money to rent a room anywhere. Eventually, she ran out of money completely and had been sleeping outside for the past week. "I was trying to get to the next town when I got lost," Elena said. "I had been walking for 2 days without food when I found that old barn. I was so tired I couldn't go any further." Jake shook his head, amazed that she had survived such a difficult journey. "You don't have to keep traveling," he said. "You can stay here as long as you need to?" Elena looked up at him with surprise. "I can't do that. I don't want to be a burden." "You wouldn't be a burden," Jake said firmly. "This house is too big for just me anyway, and I could use some help around here if you're interested in working." For the first time since he had found her, Elena smiled just a little bit. "I'm a good worker," she said. "I can cook and clean, and I know how to take care of a garden." "Then it's settled," Jake said. "You'll stay here, at least until you figure out what you want to do next." Elena's eyes filled with tears again, but this time they looked like tears of relief instead of sadness. "Thank you," she whispered. "I don't know how to repay your kindness." "You don't need to repay anything," Jake said. "Sometimes people just need help, and I'm glad I can provide it." He showed Elena to the guest room upstairs, which had a comfortable bed and a window that looked out over the pastures. He found some of his mother's old clothes in the closet, simple dresses and sweaters that would fit Elena much better than her worn-out clothes. "Rest as long as you need to," Jake told her. "When you feel up to it, I'll show you around the ranch." As Jake closed the door to let Elena rest, he felt something he hadn't experienced in years. The house didn't feel empty anymore. Elena slept for almost 12 hours straight. When she finally woke up, the sun was already setting outside her window. For a moment, she felt confused about where she was. The bed was so soft and warm, nothing like the hard ground she had been sleeping on for weeks. Then she remembered Jake, the kind cowboy who had found her at the old barn and brought her to his ranch. She sat up slowly and looked around the guest room. It was simple but comfortable, with wooden furniture and clean white curtains. On the dresser, Jake had left some clothes that must have belonged to his mother. There was a blue dress, a warm sweater, and even some undergarments that looked like they had never been worn. Elena felt tears in her eyes again. When was the last time someone had been so thoughtful and kind to her? Elena got dressed in the clean clothes. They fit pretty well, just a little loose, but they were so much better than her old worn-out things. She looked at herself in the mirror and was surprised. With clean clothes and after a good rest, she looked more like herself again. For weeks, she had felt like a homeless person, dirty and desperate. Now she felt human again. When she went downstairs, she found Jake in the kitchen making dinner. He looked up and smiled when he saw her. "You look much better," he said. "How did you sleep?" "Better than I have in weeks," Elena replied honestly. "Thank you for the clothes. They're beautiful." "They were my mother's," Jake said. "She would have wanted someone to get good use out of them." Elena noticed that Jake's voice got a little sad when he mentioned his mother. "What happened to your parents?" she asked gently. Jake was quiet for a moment while he stirred something. "On the stove. Car accident 5 years ago," he said. "They were coming back from town on a rainy night. Another driver ran a red light and hit them. They both died instantly." "I'm so sorry," Elena said. She understood the pain of losing family. "It must be hard living here alone with all the memories." Jake nodded. "Some days are harder than others, but this ranch was their life's work. I couldn't just sell it and walk away." Elena looked around the kitchen. She could see family photos on the walls showing Jake with his parents at different ages. "They look like a happy family. They would be proud of you for keeping it going," she said. "I hope so," Jake replied. He served dinner, beef stew with vegetables from his garden, along with fresh bread. "I made extra in case you were hungry when you woke up." As they ate, Elena told Jake more about her life with her grandmother. She talked about their little garden where they grew tomatoes and flowers, how her grandmother taught her to make bread from scratch, and the way they used to sit on their front porch in the evenings and watch the sunset. "She sounds like she was a wonderful woman," Jake said. "She was," Elena smiled sadly. "She always said that hard times don't last, but strong people do. I'm trying to remember that." After dinner, Jake showed Elena around the ranch. Even though it was getting dark, she could see that it was a big operation. There were several barns, pastures full of cattle, and fields where Jake grew hay and corn to feed the animals. Everything looked well maintained and organized. "I do most of the work myself," Jake explained as they walked. "During busy times like spring and fall, I hire a few temporary workers. But most of the year, it's just me." "That must be a lot of work for one person," Elena said. "It keeps me busy," Jake admitted. "Sometimes too busy to think about being lonely." Elena understood what he meant. Work could be a good distraction from sadness and loss. The next morning, Elena woke up early and went to the kitchen. Jake was already there, making coffee and getting ready to start his day. "Good morning," she said. "What can I do to help?" Jake looked surprised. "You don't need to work today. You should rest and recover." "I feel much better after sleeping in a real bed and eating good food," Elena said firmly. "You said I could work here, and I want to earn my keep. I don't like feeling useless." Jake could see that this was important to her. "Okay, if you're sure, but we'll start with easy things." Elena's first job was helping Jake feed the chickens and collect eggs. She had never worked with chickens before, but she learned quickly. The chickens seemed to like her gentle approach, and she was good at finding the eggs they had hidden in unusual places. Next, Jake showed her how to help prepare food for the cattle. This involved mixing different types of grain and supplements to make sure the animals got proper nutrition. Elena paid close attention to Jake's instructions and asked good questions. She wanted to learn everything correctly. "You're a quick learner," Jake said as they worked together in the feed room. "Grandma always said that if you're going to do something, you should do it right," Elena replied after they finished with the morning chores. Jake suggested that Elena might want to work on the vegetable garden behind the house. "My mother used to keep a beautiful garden there," he said, "but I've let it get overgrown since she died. I just don't have time to take care of it properly." Elena's eyes lit up when she saw the garden. Even though it was full of weeds, she could see the good soil and the neat rows where vegetables used to grow. "This has wonderful potential," she said. "With a little work, this could be producing food again? You really think so?" Jake asked. "I know so," Elena said confidently. "Grandma and I had a garden just like this. I know exactly what to do." Elena spent the rest of the morning pulling weeds and clearing dead plants from the garden. It was hard work, but she loved being outside with her hands in the soil. It reminded her of the happy times she had spent gardening with her grandmother. Jake came to check on her around lunchtime. He was amazed at how much work she had already done. "Elena, this is incredible. You've cleared more in one morning than I thought possible." Elena wiped sweat from her forehead and smiled. "I told you I was a good worker. This garden just needs some love and attention." Over the next few days, Elena established a routine. She would wake up early and help Jake with the morning chores, then spend most of the day working in the garden. In the evenings, she would help prepare dinner, and they would sit on the front porch talking about their day. Jake was amazed at how much Elena accomplished in the garden. She had a natural talent for knowing what plants needed. She could tell which vegetables were healthy and which ones needed special care. Within a week, the garden was completely transformed from an overgrown mess into neat, organized rows ready for planting. "How did you learn so much about gardening?" Jake asked one evening as they looked at her progress. "Grandma taught me everything," Elena said. "She said that growing your own food was one of the most important skills a person could have." She grew up during the Great Depression, so she understood the value of being able to feed yourself. Elena also proved to be an excellent cook. She took over most of the meal preparation, and Jake found himself looking forward to dinner every night. She could make simple ingredients taste amazing, and she never wasted anything. If there were leftovers from one meal, she would turn them into something new and delicious the next day. I haven't eaten this well since my mother was alive, Jake told her one evening after she had made a particularly good pot roast. Cooking for someone else makes the food taste better, Elena replied. When I was traveling alone, I barely ate because nothing seemed worth the effort. But cooking for you gives me purpose. Jake noticed other changes too. Elena had gained some weight, and color had returned to her cheeks. Her hair was shiny and healthy looking again. But more than her physical appearance, her spirit seemed to be healing. She smiled more often, and sometimes he could hear her humming while she worked. In the garden, one afternoon, Jake was fixing a broken fence post when he heard Elena talking to someone. He looked around but didn't see anyone else nearby. Then he realized she was talking to the horses. She was standing by the fence of the pasture where he kept his riding horses, and they were all gathered around her, listening to her soft voice. They like you, Jake said, walking over to join her. I like them too, Elena said, gently stroking Thunder's nose. Grandma always said that animals can sense when someone has a good heart. What do you think they sense about you? Jake asked. Elena considered the question seriously. Maybe that I understand what it's like to lose your home and family. These horses were probably taken from their mothers when they were young, just like I was taken from my parents. But they learned to trust again, and they found a good place to live. Maybe I can do the same. That evening, as they sat on the porch watching the sunset, Jake realized something important. For the first time since his parents died, the ranch felt like a home again instead of just a place where he worked and slept. Elena's presence had brought life back to the property and to his daily routine. Elena, he said quietly, I want you to know that you're not just working here. You belong here? Elena looked at him with surprise. What do you mean? I mean, this is your home now if you want it to be. Not because you need a place to stay, but because you make this place better just by being here. Elena was quiet for a long time, watching the stars appear in the darkening sky. Finally, she said, I never thought I would have a home again after the fire, but this feels like where I'm supposed to be. Jake smiled. Then it settled. This is your home. Spring turned into early summer, and Elena had been living at the ranch for almost 2 months. Every day she felt more at home and more like herself again. The scared, hungry woman Jake had found by the old barn seemed like a different person now. Elena's cheeks had color in them, her eyes were bright, and she moved with confidence as she went about her daily work. But even though Elena felt more comfortable at the ranch, she still had moments of doubt. Sometimes, late at night, she would lie in bed wondering if she was taking advantage of Jake's kindness. Was she really earning her keep, or was he just being too nice to ask her to leave? These thoughts kept her awake sometimes, staring at the ceiling and worrying about the future. Jake, on the other hand, couldn't imagine the ranch without Elena anymore. She had brought life and warmth to every corner of the property. The vegetable garden was now producing fresh tomatoes, lettuce, and beans. The house always smelled like something delicious cooking in the kitchen. Even the animals seemed happier with Elena around. The horses would come running to the fence when they saw her coming, and the chickens actually laid more eggs than they had in years. But what Jake valued most was having someone to share his thoughts with at the end of each day. For 5 years, he had eaten dinner alone, watched TV alone, and gone to bed with nobody to talk to about his day. Now, every evening brought interesting conversations with Elena about everything from the weather to their dreams for the future. One warm evening in June, they were sitting on the front porch after dinner, watching the cattle graze in the distance. Elena was mending one of Jake's work shirts that had torn on a fence post, and Jake was reading through some paperwork from his accountant. Jake, Elena said quietly, not looking up from her sewing, do you ever think about getting married and having a family? Jake looked up from his papers, surprised by the question. Sometimes, he said honestly. Before my parents died, I always figured I would meet someone eventually and settle down. But after the accident, I just focused on keeping the ranch going. I guess I stopped thinking about it. Elena nodded, still concentrating on her stitching. Grandma used to worry that I would never find someone, She said I was too independent and that men don't like women who can take care of themselves. Your grandmother was wrong about that, Jake said firmly. Any man would be lucky to have someone like you. Elena looked up at him then, and their eyes met for a moment before she looked away again. What about you? What kind of woman do you think you'd want to marry? Jake thought about the question seriously. Someone kind, he said. Someone who understands that ranch life isn't easy but can find joy in simple things. Someone who isn't afraid of hard work and who loves animals. He paused, then added quietly, someone like you. Elena's hand stopped moving and she looked at him again. This time she didn't look away. Jake, do you mean that? I do, he said. Elena, these past 2 months have been the happiest I've been in years. You've brought this place back to life and you've brought me back to life too. Elena set down her sewing and was quiet for a long time. Jake started to worry that he had said too much, too soon. Maybe she didn't think of him that way? Maybe she was just grateful for his help and saw him as a friend, nothing more. I've been thinking about leaving, Elena said finally. Jake felt like someone had punched him in the stomach. Leaving? Why? Have I done something wrong? No, Elena said quickly. You've been perfect. That's the problem. Jake looked confused. I don't understand. Elena stood up and walked to the porch railing, looking out at the mountains in the distance. Jake, you saved my life. When you found me, I had nothing. No food, no money, no place to go. You gave me everything, a home, work, respect, kindness. How can I know if my feelings for you are real or if I'm just grateful? Now Jake understood. He stood up and walked over to stand beside her. What kind of feelings do you have for me? Elena turned to look at him and he could see tears in her eyes. I think I'm falling in love with you, she whispered. But I'm scared that it's not real love. I'm scared that I'm just confused because you rescued me when I had nowhere else to go. Jake reached out and gently took her hand. Elena, let me tell you something. I've helped plenty of people over the years. When neighbors needed assistance during storms, when other ranchers had troubles with their cattle, when travelers got lost and needed directions, I helped them because it was the right thing to do, but I never asked any of them to stay. I never wanted any of them to become part of my life. Elena listened carefully to his words. With you, it was different from the very beginning, Jake continued. Yes, I wanted to help you because you needed help. But I also wanted you to stay because being around you made me happy. You weren't just someone I was helping, you were someone I wanted to know better. But how can you be sure? Elena asked. How do you know you're not just lonely and I'm the first woman who's been around? Jake smiled gently. Because I've been lonely for 5 years and I never felt this way about anyone else. Elena, I'm not falling in love with you because you needed rescuing. I'm falling in love with you because of who you are. You're strong, you're kind, you're smart, and you make everything better just by being here. Elena looked down at their joined hands. I want to believe that, she said softly. Then believe it, Jake said. And if you need proof that my feelings are real, then leave. Elena looked up at him, shocked. What? Leave for a week, Jake said. Go visit some of the towns around here. Meet other people, see other places. If you come back, then you'll know it's because you want to be here, not because you feel like you have to be. Elena stared at him. You would really let me go? I would hate every minute of it, Jake said honestly. But yes, I would let you go. Because I want you to choose to be here, not feel trapped here. Elena was quiet for a long time, thinking about what Jake had said. Finally, she shook her head. I don't need to leave to know how I feel, she said. I already know. What do you know? Jake asked. I know that when I wake up in the morning, the first thing I think about is seeing you at breakfast. I know that when I'm working in the garden, I listen for the sound of your truck coming back from the fields. I know that when we sit here in the evenings talking, I never want the conversation to end. Jake felt his heart beating faster. And what does that tell you? It tells me that I'm not here because I'm grateful, Elena said. I'm here because this is where I want to be with you. Jake stepped closer to her. Elena, I need you to know something. If we're going to do this, if we're going to be together, it won't be because I rescued you. It will be because we choose each other as equals." "What do you mean?" Elena asked. "I mean that you're not a lost woman I saved anymore," Jake said. "You're a strong, capable woman who could go anywhere and do anything she wanted. You have skills, you have intelligence, you have everything you need to make it on your own. If you stay here, it's not because you need me, it's because you want me." Elena smiled, and for the first time since they'd started this conversation, she looked completely relaxed. "You're right," she said. "I'm not the same person you found at that old barn. I'm stronger now, and I know what I want." "What do you want?" Jake asked. "I want you," Elena said simply. "I want this life we're building together. I want to wake up every morning knowing that we're a team." Jake reached up and gently touched her face. "I want that too," he said. "More than anything." As they stood there on the porch under the stars, both Jake and Elena realized that something important had changed between them. They weren't just a kind man helping a woman in need anymore. They were two people who had chosen to build a life together. "So what happens now?" Elena asked. "Now we see where this goes," Jake said. "No rush, no pressure. We just take it one day at a time and see what develops." Elena nodded. "I'd like that." They sat back down on the porch swing, and Elena rested her head on Jake's shoulder. For the first time in months, she wasn't worried about the future. Whatever happened, she knew that she had found something real with Jake, something that had nothing to do with rescue or gratitude, and everything to do with love. "Jake?" Elena said softly. "Yeah? Thank you for giving me the choice to leave. It helped me realize that I never want to." Jake kissed the top of her head gently. "Thank you for choosing to stay." As they sat there together, watching the moon rise over the mountains, both of them knew that their relationship had moved to a new level. They were no longer just two lonely people who had found comfort in each other's company. They were two people who had discovered that sometimes the best things in life come from the most unexpected places. Summer moved into early fall, and the ranch was busier than it had been in years. Jake and Elena worked together like they had been partners for decades. They had developed a rhythm that felt natural and easy. Elena would wake up first and start breakfast while Jake fed the horses. They would eat together, plan their day, and then split up to handle different tasks around the property. Elena had expanded the vegetable garden and was now preserving food for winter. The kitchen counters were often covered with jars of pickled vegetables, homemade jam, and canned tomatoes. She had learned to make cheese from the milk of the 2 cows Jake kept, and she was even talking about getting some pigs to raise for meat. "You're turning into a real farm wife," Jake teased her one morning as she checked on a batch of bread rising on the windowsill. "Is that what I am?" Elena asked with a smile. "A farm wife?" Jake realized what he had said and felt his cheeks turn red. "I mean, someone who... Well, you're not my wife, but you do the things that ... He stopped talking and ran his hand through his hair, looking embarrassed. Elena laughed at his confusion. "Jake Mitchell, are you trying to propose to me?" "Not like this," Jake said quickly. "When I propose to you, it's going to be done right." Elena stopped laughing and stared at him. "When you propose to me?" Jake realized he had said it again. "I mean, if I ever... That is, if you would want..." He took a deep breath and looked at her seriously. "Elena, I love you. I want to marry you. I want us to be a real family." Elena set down the dish towel she had been holding and walked over to him. "I love you too, Jake, but are you sure? Marriage is a big step." "I've never been more sure of anything in my life," Jake said. "These past months with you have been the best of my life. I can't imagine a future without you in it." Elena reached up and touched his face gently. "Then yes, when you ask me properly, I'll say yes." Jake grinned and picked her up, spinning her around the kitchen while she laughed. When he set her down, they both knew that they had just made a commitment to each other, even without an official proposal. Over the next few weeks, Jake started planning how he would propose properly. He wanted it to be special, something Elena would remember forever. He thought about taking her to a fancy restaurant in town, but that didn't feel right. Elena wasn't the type of person who cared about expensive things. She found joy in simple, meaningful moments. Then Jake remembered the place where he had first found her. The old homestead by Willow Creek had become special to both of them. It was where their story began, where a desperate woman and a lonely man had first met and changed each other's lives forever. One Saturday morning in late August, Jake suggested they take a picnic lunch and ride out to check on the cattle in the far pastures. Elena thought it was a great idea. She packed sandwiches, fresh fruit from their garden, and a thermos of lemonade. They saddled up Thunder and Star, a gentle mare that Elena had learned to ride over the summer as they rode through the familiar trails. Elena chatted about her plans for the garden next year and how she wanted to try growing pumpkins for the first time. Jake listened and responded, but part of his mind was focused on the small box in his saddlebag. Inside was his grandmother's engagement ring, a simple gold band with a small diamond that had been in his family for 3 generations. When they reached the old homestead, Jake suggested they stop for lunch. They tied their horses to a tree and spread out a blanket near the spot where Jake had first seen Elena sitting against the old barn wall. "It's hard to believe it's only been 6 months since you found me here," Elena said as she unpacked their lunch. "It feels like a lifetime ago." "You were so scared and skinny," Jake said, sitting down beside her on the blanket. "I wasn't sure you were going to trust me enough to come back to the ranch." "I almost didn't," Elena admitted. "I had learned not to trust strangers, but there was something about you that felt safe." They ate their lunch and talked about that first day, remembering how nervous they had both been. Elena told Jake that she had been terrified he would change his mind and ask her to leave. Jake told Elena that he had been afraid she would disappear in the middle of the night before he could convince her she was safe. After they finished eating, Jake stood up and walked over to the ruins of the old barn. He stood there for a moment, looking at the place where he had first seen the woman who had changed his entire life. "Elena," he said, turning back to face her, "will you come here for a minute?" Elena stood up and walked over to him, curious about why he looked so serious. When she reached him, Jake took her hands in his and looked into her green eyes. "6 months ago, I found you sitting right here," Jake said. "You had nothing, no food, no shelter, no family. But even then, even when you were at your lowest point, I could see your strength. I could see the amazing woman you were, even when you couldn't see it yourself." Elena felt tears starting to form in her eyes. She had a feeling she knew what was coming. "You've brought life back to my ranch and to my heart," Jake continued. "You've made me remember what it feels like to have a family and a home. You've shown me that love can grow from the most unexpected places and become stronger than anything else in the world." Jake reached into his pocket and pulled out the small box. Elena gasped and put her hand over her mouth as he got down on one knee. "Elena Rodriguez," Jake said, opening the box to reveal the ring. "Will you marry me? Will you be my wife, my partner, and my family for the rest of our lives?" Elena was crying now, tears of joy streaming down her face. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes, Jake, I'll marry you." Jake slipped the ring onto her finger and stood up to kiss her. As they held each other in the place where their love story had begun, both of them felt like the luckiest people in the world. "It's perfect," Elena said, looking at the ring through her tears. "It's absolutely perfect." "It was my grandmother's," Jake said. "She wore it for 53 years. My grandfather gave it to her when they were both young and poor, just starting out on their own farm." "Just like us," Elena said softly. "Just like us," Jake agreed. They decided to have a simple wedding at the ranch in October, when the leaves would be changing colors and the weather would be cool and comfortable. Elena didn't have any family to invite, and Jake only had a few cousins who lived far away. But that was okay with both of them. They invited their neighbors, the pastor from the local church, and a few friends from town. Elena made her own wedding dress, a simple white dress that was perfect for a ranch wedding. Jake bought a new suit and had his hair cut short. The ceremony was held in the backyard, with the mountains as a backdrop and the vegetable garden Elena had worked so hard on visible in the distance. As they exchanged vows, promising to love and support each other through good times and bad. Elena thought about how far she had come. 6 months ago, she had been a homeless woman with no hope for the future. Now, she was marrying the kindest man she had ever met and starting a new life, full of love and possibility. When the pastor pronounced them husband and wife, Jake leaned down and whispered in Elena's ear, "You're my wife forever now." Elena smiled through her happy tears. "Forever," she whispered back. Their first dance was to a country song playing on an old radio set up on the porch. As they swayed together under the stars, surrounded by friends and neighbors who had come to celebrate their love, Elena felt truly at peace for the first time since her grandmother died. "What are you thinking about?" Jake asked as they danced. "I'm thinking about how Grandma always said that when God closes one door, He opens another," Elena replied. "Losing her and our home was the worst thing that ever happened to me. But if it hadn't happened, I never would have found you." "Do you think she would have liked me?" Jake asked. "She would have loved you," Elena said with certainty. "She would have said you were exactly the kind of man she hoped I would find." After the guests went home and they cleaned up from the party, Jake and Elena sat on their front porch as a married couple for the first time. The house that had been too big and empty for Jake was now a home filled with love and laughter. "So what happens now?" Elena asked, curled up against Jake's side. "Now we live happily ever after," Jake said, kissing the top of her head. Elena laughed. "Is it really that simple?" "With you, everything is simple," Jake said. "We'll work ranch together, maybe have some kids someday, grow old together watching sunsets from this porch. It sounds perfect to me." "It sounds perfect to me too," Elena agreed, as they sat there planning their future together. Neither of them could have imagined how their love story would inspire others. Years later, when people asked them how they knew they were meant to be together, Jake and Elena would always say the same thing. Sometimes the best things in life come when you least expect them. And love can bloom even in the most difficult circumstances. Their story became a reminder that kindness to strangers can change lives. That love doesn't always look like fairy tales, and that sometimes the person you're meant to spend your life with is the one who finds you when you have nothing left to lose.